Happy Friday. Welcome back to Ribbon Candy Hooking. I'm Deanna. It's great. It's extra great to see you today. I have to say, I am so sorry on Wednesday. I meant to run a show, and normally I would give you information like I said I was going to, and I completely got like abducted by aliens. Not really, but completely forgot. I am so sorry. It got so crazy all of a sudden, and it just completely slipped my mind that I should post something. I'm so sorry about that, everybody. Happy Friday and welcome back. Does it look like behind me we're sitting at that circa 1930 kind of lodge in northern New England? Doesn't it look super charming? You want to sit by that fire, have some chats and drinks and work on rugs together. Oh, wouldn't it be nice to be in this room for real? Maybe it still exists. I know it says on the thumbnail for the show where this is. It isn't like some lodge or some old inn or something like that. Let me say hello to all my buddies. I have been looking forward to seeing you all day. Melanie, it's great to see you. Happy Friday. You are weaving again in beautiful, sunny, and warm Washington. Oh, that sounds great. The first truly spring-like day you've had. What a perfect day for it. A Friday. I hope it can keep up the good work, right? That sounds amazing. Cheryl, great to see you. Happy cocktail night. You got your blueberry wine, your new project. Ooh, that sounds intriguing. Enjoyed a great day outside. Oh, that is nice, isn't it? I know. You would like to make an would you like to make a cameo? Okay, come here. Let me see if I can grab you. Come here, you little rascal. There he goes. Here he goes. He gonna come up. He gonna come up into the 1930 room too. Buttons the dog. Buttons the dog. I have to put the alarm on the phone because he's got a guess what he's got tomorrow morning at 8:30. He has got a appointment at Petco for a haircut. Yep, he's got an appointment for a haircut because he is a hot mess, isn't he? Oh, Buttons. Deborah, good to see you. Good evening. Great to see you. Kaz, great to see you. Happy cocktail night. Oh, it's windy and cold in Wisconsin. Ooh, cheers, my dears. Linda, it's great to see you. Karen, happy cocktail night. Happy post-birthday days. Homemade spaghetti sauce. Oh, that sounds really nice. Simmering on the stove and a glass of wine in hand. That sounds civilized. I'm going to need a glass of wine in a little while, too, I think. Putting my order in. I don't know if anybody heard me there. All right, good. Thank you. Not now, not now. We're just finishing up dinner here. I just had some noodles. I had surgery this morning, so although I feel remarkably good, I'm being really careful to use one hand, which is annoying. Oh man, Maureen indulging in champagne and brie on toast in windy Michigan. That sounds fantastic. Oh, there's not a lot of things that's better than brie on toast, right? That is really class. That's class. Mom, yay, cocktail night. Hello to you. Good to see you, Mom. We were just there for a couple days this week while the kids have been off school this week, which was so fun. I said to my mom, it always goes by like that. It's incredible how quickly it goes by when we go and visit. And we had, I don't know if we're friends on regular Facebook, not just our big Facebook group, which is Rug Hooking and Punch Needle Club, but like regular friends too. I'm friends with many people, and I love to see what everybody's doing, not in a creepy way, just in a friendly way. And I posted some pictures because on Wednesday we were there on Wednesday. Were we there on Wednesday? No, we were there on Monday. Yeah, we were there Monday and Tuesday. V8. Yeah, we got there on Monday, and then yeah, because I ran a show on Monday, and then on Tuesday we took a drive because it was beautiful weather here in New England. Oh my God, it was one of these things. We have to talk about this and brainstorm a little bit because we went driving, right? And I'm in Connecticut, and my mom's in Granby, and we wanted to go to an antique store and check out an area that we hadn't checked out yet. Now, I kind of thought in my arrogance, and because of the fact that I was a tour guide for so many years before I had kids and everything changed, I kind of thought that I knew all the really great places in New England. And I'm so happy to be wrong about that. I'd love to be even more wrong and find lots more. But we took a nice drive through, if you know the area, Barkhamsted over the reservoir, which is beautiful, through Winstead, which is it's a fairly sketchy town. But I noticed that the main street is really picking up. Lots of old antique stores on the main street, but they're never open. you know, lots of old mills, lots of broken windows in the old mills. But I noticed the, despite the broken windows, a lot of it was being rented and used by artists. And I thought, ooh, things are changing here. Well, that's good because they have a beautiful lake in that town called Highland Lake. It's way high up. It's way up a hill, very, very steep. Beautiful, beautiful lake, not huge, but the temperature is always sort of science fiction warm. It's like something out of a book. You can just walk right in there. It's remarkably warm. And there's a natural well right next to the lake where water is just splashing all over the place, and it was extra splashing. And I wondered, like it was just coming out like you know, like exploding out of the little tap. And people are usually, thank you, people are usually standing around with things to fill, like vessels to fill with beautiful fresh water. It is like the most divine and amazing water ever. No one was there, so we filled some stuff up. But I wondered if it was extra crazy, the pressure, because of the earthquake or something. I don't know how these things work, but it was exciting. So we went through there, and then we drove further through. If you know the area, it's spelled like Norfolk, but people say Norfolk here. And what a beautiful town that is. And Canaan. And then normally, and I've done this a million times, there's a fork, and I go toward the Berkshires in Massachusetts. Well, this time, right? Talk about the road not taken. We took a left instead. And I had my husband Aryan in the car, and Teddy, Joss was having some Gami time. Teddy loves to go for a road trip. He loves to see what he can see. So we took a left at the fork, and it was like one of those lefts, right? One of those great left turns. And we hit a town called Salisbury, which was beautiful, that I've never seen before. Beautiful little formal Main Street, lots of buzzing around, small, very small, but cute places to eat, a few storefronts. And then same road, next town was called Lakeville, just what you would expect, on this huge lake. And the lake was much lower than the town, so it was like looking down on the lake. And it was like there was like 100 little white sailboats, like almost like sunfish out there, but all white. It looked like a regatta. It looked like Newport. It was crazy how beautiful it was. And then one more town over, we crossed the New York line, got out of the car to take a picture. Like, how lame are we? Because we're in and out of New York all the time. But I would never stop going into like New York on the city side to take a photo. So we took a photo, went into the town. First town over was called Millerton, and it was the cute as a button, old-fashioned town, zany architecture. It was like the movie Christmas in Connecticut, except that it was warm, like, you know, very, very warm. Everything was like a moment in time. Best antiques, my favorite antique store I think I've ever been to. Not huge. Everything was interested. I ended up getting a rug that I'll show you when I can carry stuff a little bit better because my arm is really bothering me. Big mounted rug. There was lots of hooked pieces there. There's only one antique store in Millerton. Oh, I got the can you bring the bag with the wool that I found? Wait till you see this. This is just nutty. I'll show you. And a few jars of buttons, you know, but just brown ones, like, ooh, like just Bakelite brown. It was unreal. It was really fun. It was just fantastic. There's a little diner in the center of town, a little pizza joint, beautiful old-time bookstore. And as it turned out, one of our favorite writers, Neil Gaiman, had been there recently to sign books. And it was like, what is Neil Gaiman doing in this tiny little nowhere town in New York that no one's ever heard of? It's like this sleepy little village, very steep Main Street. It was just as cute as a button. If you're anywhere near there, highly recommend for the day. Great hit at the antique store. Look at this thing I found. Let me see. This was one item. Let's not knock that down. This was one item. I'm going to give it to you when I'm done, if that's okay. And it looked like this when I'm going to hold it up. I know the green screen is going to wreak havoc. Oh no, one of them fell. Hang on. It looked like this as soon as I walked through the door. Ow, ow, ow. 3 of these, right? You see this giant coat hanger with all this Persian wool for needlepoint? Like, how crazy is that? This brown one, this kind of dove gray, and it's got some greens and some neutrals, and this all green that you can't see at all. It looks like phantom stuff, but you'll have to take my word for it. It's all greens, browns and russets, and then these pretty neutrals with whites. $65 for all of that. I mean, I can barely hold it because it's so heavy. It was on a coat rack as soon as I walked through the door, and it was like, oh, thank you, angels, for singing. It was like, obviously, I'm in the right place. And then I found the mounted rug, and oh, God, it was so highly recommend. In synopsis, to make a long story short, too late. If you know places like that, shout them out. I live to find these kinds of places. I don't need to find them on my own. If you tell me, oh, you know what, you're not too far from this place in Pennsylvania or this place in Massachusetts or northern New England or somewhere else in New York, let me know. I love finding these kinds of places. You never know, right? God, it was so much fun. It was incredible, just incredible. And you can't do that every weekend because you will run out of places, right? Just with the car. But you know who it reminded me of, right? Lead into tonight's show, W.W. Kent. Just the idea of just driving around without really having a destination, and and finding cute stuff and doing a little bit of shopping and a little bit of eating and taking pictures of architecture and just seeing views I've never seen before. Isn't it nice when you find a street or a town that you've never been before and it's pleasing? It's not like a crappy place with a bunch of strip plazas, but it's actually a charming place that you think, oh, I'm going to be dreaming about this when I go to sleep tonight, in a good way. Oh, it's so nice when that happens. Um, all right, let's keep going. We have so much to. Well, we can take our time tonight. I'm not moving super fast, I have to say. Catherine, great to see you. You had a wonderful facial. We are all having fun times today, right? It sounds like exciting things, relaxing things, like civilized things. Brie, facials, shopping. I mean, this is just some nice wine, some nice cocktails out there. Bonnie, great to see you from Palm Coast, Florida. Very happy that you're there. Joyce, great to see you. Happy cocktail night. I'm going to do a cheers, my dears. Mm. Oh, that's, I think, the Tohu, Mom. That is the best one. That's my favorite one anyway. Tohu. I just love it. It's so good and dry. Let me catch up on cocktails. Let me catch up on comments here. Linda B, great to see you. Christine, great to see you. Really great to see you. And Christine sent last week, it must have been Monday, those beautiful pictures from the Emily Dickinson house in Amherst. Remember? We looked at those, the wallpaper, the floors. Christine said one of them that I said, oh, I wonder if that's linoleum. Was linoleum. Do you remember that one? Very geometric. And Christine's going to be headed not this weekend, but is it next weekend, to Concord, Mass for the Louise May Alcott House. That is going to have layers of beautiful patterns and interest too. And she drew on the walls of her bedroom, so even more designs happening there. Though those would make legitimately great rug designs because they're drawings that go earlier than 1928, right? They go like much earlier. I hope you have fun. Take lots of pictures. Everybody, take pictures when you go have adventures, and send the pictures so we can. Maybe we should do like once a month, like a travel night on this show where we see places that people have been, and you have to take a photo too if you ate somewhere cute or if you found something pretty that we would be interested in, right? Wouldn't that be a fun night to look at everybody's adventures? Um, you're making plenty of noise in there. Just saying. Sorry, I mean it sounds like farts. That's why I say it. It's like boxes ripping, and it doesn't sound good. It makes me look suspicious over here. Love your top. Thank you, Kaz. Found this cute top at Facebook Marketplace. Right? Somebody took. Remember these days of doing stuff like this. Let's do more of this stuff. It's just a sweatshirt, right? It's just a blue sweatshirt that somebody just cut down the front. Just cut it at the neck, right down the front, and look it patched on with the machine a bunch of just pretty quilt squares. It's front and back. But how do you think with the sleeves? How do you think they machine did it? I'm just trying to, as someone who sews, I'm wondering if they had one of those like little handheld machines or something because it's definitely machine stitched, real artsy too. And I just wondered because that would never go over my throat plate on my machine, like in a million years. I wonder if anybody has the solution for that because I was thinking, oh, I'd love to cut up some more um, sweatshirts and do this kind of stuff because what a lot of fun, particularly when you've got a lot of sweatshirts and a lot of quilting material, like I think a lot of us do. It's just a lot of fun to put something like that together. And this can't be rocket surgery, right? This is just sewing. Could hand sew it, but the decorative stitches that she did on here, the swirlies and things, Really fun, really fun. Thank you for noticing. I was really happy with this find. Judy, great to see you. Melanie, I'm trying. Oh, so you're doing weaving talk there. I'm trying to tie on a warp as I lurk. Hope I don't get distracted and make a mistake. Oh, I hope so too, because it's like hell to pay, isn't it, when you make a mistake on the loom? Maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe I speak out of turn. And Catherine, happy cocktail night. Del some cough syrup for me tonight. Oh, I'm sorry, but I'm so glad that you're there. Oh, I hope you feel better soon. I know you will. Melissa, great to see you. Happy Friday. Lisa, happy Friday. Cheers, my dears. Diane, hey everybody. Vodka, orange juice, and tonic water. Oh, that sounds good too. Zyros VR Madison from Mississippi. Great to see you, Madison. I remember. I hope everyone's had a great week so far. Oh, and you too. I hope you've had a great week. April, happy cocktail night from Illinois. Good to see you, Kirsten. Hello for a second from Vermont. We'll take it. Good to see you, Joy, my love. Good to see you. Happy Friday night, Dave. Hello. Having your coffee porter beer. Oh, I so love that. Cheese and crackers. Cheers, my dears. Let's do cheers, my dears. Cheers, my dears. No matter what you've got, right? Maybe not the cough syrup, right? Measure the cough syrup, but everything else is up for grabs. Mm. Olivia will turn that magazine right around so it'll be here when you're here. I promise. Good to see you in Ireland, my love. Good to see you. You know, I had surgery this morning, which was such a bummer. And I'm so happy that it's over. But I have to say, it was worse than I thought. And it's just one of those things, isn't it? You know, I had something on my arm, right, like a freckle that was suspicious. Now have a larger incision and therefore scar on my arm than my C-section, and I've had two C-sections. I mean, this is unreal, considering that I don't officially have cancer, right? So they're hoping it wouldn't turn into cancer, but to err on the cautious side, and I'm all for preventative, right? They took out a huge chunk. I'm not even going to say divot. It was like a huge chunk of my arm. And you know, it wasn't that it was painful, but these things are not nice, are they? And the lead up to it is what really got me. I wish that there was a way to avoid this part, like the red tape, the processing part, because I thought that the whole affair would be a lot more casual, and I would just I was not nervous at all, right? I was just like, yeah, I was, texting right up into the last second, and then I got in there, and it's like, take off all your clothes, put on the mob cap, right? Take your shoes off, put on the booties. A thing opens in the back, and I'm like, okay, like this is serious. I thought I was just going in. I had like a sleeveless top on, right, so they could just do their thing. And I thought, oh, she's going to give me 120 shots in the arm. I was expecting that because we already did that with the biopsy. But man, then they leave you to your thoughts, right? And you sit there and stew for an indefinite amount of time. And then you start thinking about the things that you've managed to not think about up till then. But when you're sitting there with the shower cap on and no brassiere in your stupid robe that opens in the back, and you're waiting for them to like wheel something in to transport you to the operating, what do they call it, theater. It's like, ooh, now I'm really thinking about this. And I got myself so wound up and nervous thinking about it that by the time I got in there, I was almost a nervous wreck. And everything seemed much worse. It was like, what's that saying? Worry can make small things have big shadows, right? By that time, everything had a big shadow. And it was like, 10 people standing around. Oh my God, it was a really big deal. It was just not the scale of thing that I thought it was. And this is not the scale of thing that I thought it was. But it is what it is, and it's over now. So that's the main thing, right? But man, that was not easy. And I'm expecting a lot of pain. But we'll stop with that because it was not very nice. Jessica, good to see you, Jessica. I love Neil Gaiman too. I know that was crazy. We bought some autographed books and things from that little place. Who knew, right? Who knew? Middle of nowhere. And it's funny because so Neil Gaiman at this place in Millerton, Kay Fassett at the Colchester Mill, which is a quilt store, also near me here in Connecticut. It's funny the kind of celebrities that some of these stores that I don't know, they're just regular stores. I don't think of them as like big landmark places. It's funny the names that they draw are such big names. I guess there's a lot of money in Connecticut, so that's probably why. That was a good find, wasn't it? All that Persian wool. Well, the thing about all that Persian wool was it just was so tactile, hanging on those old hangers like that. Obviously, someone was doing needlepoint or something, and they had the thing about that. I brought it to the counter, right? Because I didn't want anyone else getting it, and so I put it up there. And when I brought it to the counter, the two ladies, I mean, that wool was as soon as you walked through the door, you could not miss it. You could not miss it. It was the first thing you saw. So much of it, right? Super colorful. I walked in and put it on the counter, and both of the ladies said, "Oh my God, where did you find this?" I knit and I would have used this in place of sock yarn if I had seen it. And I'm thinking, "Oh my God, oh my God, could you are you like I can't find my way out of a paper bag kind of a person?" Because it was literally right next to the desk, right where they sit all day. And the other lady too. "Oh, I wish I had seen that." And I'm like, put my name on it. I really want it. It was so beautiful. And I said to them, the thing about having that much wool, right? Because I said, like, oh, I'm a rug hooker. It's quite thin for me, but I'm probably gonna punch with it. I'll probably quadruple it up. But it's absolutely 100% wool. The color is gorgeous and fast, like lasting color. And there's so many colors, and it's color planned already because each hanger, like one of them is oranges and rusts, one is neutrals and grays, and one of them is all greens. And I thought, I think we're on our way to some good autumn compositions here. If it had had every color, like if there were blues and pinks and reds in there, I don't think I would have gotten it just because I would have thought, yeah, it's a lot of wool. I probably have all those colors already in the same. It's that what do you call that wool? The Persian wool that people use for. It's a specific brand. Um, it's not the DMC. The one I mean that you buy it by the strand at needlepoint stores and knitting stores still. But the fact that it was color planned by somebody else gave it a bit of magic. It's like as soon as someone touches something else or starts another project or gets you going with like a color plan, it becomes way more magical because then it's like you are the passing of the baton, like you're picking up their project and something that they started or they got planning, and then you run with it for however long you run with it. And there is something so beautiful about picking something up that someone else has already organized or started. So it was one of those. I was very lucky. It was super beautiful. Really good find. April, you can get freeform sewing feet for the machine. Oh, you're kidding. You can get free for okay, now hold on a second. You can get free form, but April, wouldn't you still have the same problem of how to get like the sleeve under the thing without sewing through both layers? Do you know? Am I being? I'm probably being stupid, right? The medication, the whatever, which was only local because I drove home after the surgery. Doesn't that sound strange to have like that much whatever, but it's so local? I'm stopping because it's so gross. But I feel like my head is still not quite right. But yeah, I'm just thinking if you put the sleeve under, I would expect it to sew through both layers because I could never get just the sleeve like this, onto the throat plate and under the presser foot. Maybe what you wrote does explain that, and I'm just not getting it. I might have to look that up. What a find. Yeah, right? Really good find. It's fun finding stuff like that. It's so fun finding supplies like all of these buttons that I found too. Um, and you know what else I found? It was absolutely a sign. I found a great art book on the group of seven, right? So I have some group of seven books, individuals within the seven, but this was like a nice overview I've never seen before. It might have been from a gallery or something on the group of seven, the group of, this is a Canadian group of painters. And I thought, you know what I'm going to do for the next design, like group of seven. So you're going to see that coming up in the next few days. I'm also going to do a hit or miss class. So one will be a practical class that I'm about to put out, and it'll be like hooking with hit or miss. I'm evolving it now and thinking maybe everybody gets a giant bag that's just under a pound, right? So shipping isn't crazy. That's literally stuffed with hit or miss noodles, every color, every cut, and then we have to think of whether we do a design together or it comes with a design or what. We'll figure that part out. But just the idea of hooking different things in a hit or miss style. Oh, I just got an idea for a design that has multiple designs within it, and we do different hit or miss backings just to practice, because even within the world of hit or miss, as we're seeing with these Kent rugs, there's lots of different ways to do hit or miss. So I'll be putting out that one practical class on hit or miss, and then we'll be doing design like the group of seven. Those two will be coming up in the very near future. um, Barbara, great to see you. Love the idea of sharing villages and finds. I do too. because it puts our group and all of our conversations like literally on the map, right? Where we can like chart where each other plural are, um, and find places that other people love to visit, right? That would be really, if we can kind of connect that way, we would sort of interlace physically on the map, and that would be a lot of fun. I'm starstruck. You remember me. I hope the procedure went well. Yes, 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 of course, of course. It did. I think it did. They'll tell me if there's like a problem, but hope there's not a problem. I don't want to do that again anytime soon. I will if I have to, but man, not fun. Melanie says, yikes, I understand. I had a spot biopsy and it turned out to be skin cancer, so I had a big chunk removed from my leg. Yeah, it's not that it's painful. The heebie-jeebie factor is through the roof. That's what it is, isn't it? Because they make it so that the shots were incredibly painful. They were like astonishingly painful, but they're shots, right? So like it has a shape, right? It's not like a Twilight Zone episode and someone's like cutting off my leg with a saw or something awful like that. It's like it has a shape. It really hurts. Nothing else hurts, but it's just your mind like running wild. Ooh, so bad. Yes, yes, and Catherine, I never know how to say that either. Paternaean. Do you think I did sort of close? That is the kind of wool that you get by the strand. So that find was crazy because that's hundreds and hundreds of strands. Karen says, so sorry, Deanna. I hate procedures like that. I've always wondered what they would do if I just walked out. It was tempting. I was getting into that panic zone, where I was like losing it a little bit. Free arm option on the sewing machine would allow a sleeve to be fed. Oh, you've got to be kidding me. Okay, so the free arm option on a sewing machine, okay, would allow for the sleeve to be fed for applique. You have got to be kidding me. See, I don't have a fancy machine at all. I have several machines. None of them are fancy. One moves like a locomotive, like a big old heavy one that's great for some like drapes and things like that. Quilting, it moves like a train. And the one I use every day is just for doing the edges on patterns and stuff that I send out. And it's not a fancy one, it's just a basic one. I think I need to get a nicer machine that has different options because stuff like this is like, it's just so fun. That's really good information. I'm really glad I wore this. I wasn't going to. Now I'm glad I did because I got all that good info. Hit or miss sampler class. Yeah, that is gonna be fun. You know what I found? I want to share this with you before we start looking at Kent again. And man, it's going to be Kent for a while. I got to tell you, I want to go back into the book and look at some of the text in the book that I think is just not just charming, but super informative and gives us such a unique first person window into rug hooking in the 1930s and 20s. But I was in the basement trying to tidy stuff up, and I the amount of books that I have that I've been hoarding for many years it's really it's incredible, not in a good way. So this is one of the books that I found, and I was about to put it into the little library out front. But I remember when I bought these kinds of books. This was years ago. When I read up on the history of department stores, and that's probably why I got this. And so this book is called It Sells, and it's from 1939. And you can see it's case histories of some successful retail advertisements from 1939. And I thought, look at the spiral binding on everything, right? I would have gotten this on eBay back in the day. It is published by the Bureau of Advertising. And I thought, you know what? It's all silly nillies, and I was writing a novel that was set in a department store like 10 years ago, and I still have all those notes and everything. But I thought I can't save everything anymore. I might have to save this now because I'm looking at it and it's so cute. But this whole book is about for the year 1939. Now remember, the Kent book is 1930. For the year 1939, it talks about different products that were introduced into department stores and how well the product did with a specific advertisement. For example, very boring ad, but this advertisement ran about Rocky Road candy, so 39 cents a pound. And then there's a little article on the facing page that says, sells $650 worth of confections at the cost of 3.7, right? So this is super trade information, but it goes in category by food and confections, home furnishings, and guess what I found under home furnishings? I found a section. Is the heat on? I found a section on, guess what? Scatter rugs. Now, I bring this up because these are similar to the kinds of rugs that we're seeing with Ken. Let me come a little bit closer to you. And I want to read you what this says because it fits in with the timeline of what we're doing tonight. This is the only page that talks about rugs. So I'm going to read it to you, but have a little quick gander at the styles of rugs that we're looking at. The ones on top, unexpected, don't you think? And I think some of them have a high pile. They're all, different styles. I've got to get this sweatshirt off. It's gonna turn into a murder weapon because I'm getting so hot. Do I have a? No, you can see my. Sorry, I'll keep it on. Scatter rugs, small rugs for the bedroom, bathroom, hall, etc., etc. Um, this is the advertisement. What I just showed you. That is the advertisement for 1939, and apparently this advertisement rung up. This doesn't sound like very much money, but they're very impressed by this number. Rang up $1,150 worth of rug sales. It says a department store in a Midwestern city, population group 50,000 to 100,000, ran this 36-inch with 504 lines advertisement on Friday, April 21st, 1939. The ad sold 225 rugs, totaling, I'm not good enough to do the math. See if you can do the math here. Oh, the prices are right here. Never mind. This one ad, the running of this one ad, sold 225 rugs totaling $1,150 in sales during the 3 days following its appearance. That is impressive, isn't it? According to the advertiser, it continued to attract customers for 6 weeks. And 6 weeks is heavily underlined. Like they're very, very happy with the result here. The advertising cost was 4.5%, and sales per advertising dollar based on the above sales figures was $22.46. So I think what they're saying is the 1,150 minus the $22.46 is a good profit. But it's interesting because they're showing us the different categories of rugs at this time. Now, what Kent was looking for was antique rugs, right? But isn't it interesting that they're, right in the boo-boo. Isn't it interesting that this advertisement, right, which caught so many people's eye in this Midwestern town, and they're not saying what town, it's lots of different styles of rugs, right? Kent was only interested in very old rugs. But here they're showing us washable chenille, shaggy, this is the category, shaggy tuft chenille. For example, the washable chenille is between $1.95 and $2.85 for the smaller size, $4.50 for the larger size, right? So we're talking about like on average under $10 for these rugs. So they did sell a good number. Sun-tone tufted chenille. I'm not sure I know what that means, but they're saying it's for the bathroom and the bedroom. Guaranteed fast to washing, boiling, sunlight. Made by the famous Callaway Mills. Does anybody know Callaway Mills? Floral pattern in several different colors. The first one, the washable chenille, is brown, peach, rose, blue, and green. And it has hand-tied fringe, right? These are going to be machine-made. Shaggy, tuft chenille, laundered and pre-shrunk, color fast, 21 different solid colors. So that sounds like a hit or miss rug. In the big one that's 52 by 84, sold for $22.50. The woven pile chenille rugs, I won't read all the categories. Yeah, they go all the way up to $7.95 for one that's like 48 inches long. That seems incredible. This is the fancy one, the Lakewood wool hooked rug. Lakewood, one word. And it says handmade in blocked and medallion patterns. And the hand hooked rugs. Now, where are they getting the hand hooked rugs from? Probably from communities where people organized these. I don't want to say mission, but organized these sort of you know, when someone comes into a community that's not doing well economically and somebody puts themselves in charge and then says, do this, and then I'll bring the rugs to market, like Helen Albee, somebody like that, right? I'll bring the rugs to market after you make them. And in many cases, these are upper class women and they don't actually take a percentage out of them. This is just like their version of charity work to boost the economy of some remote place. That's probably where these rugs are coming from. There's so many of these situations. I mentioned the Tamworth, right? That's the Helen Albee in the last episode. But these rugs are running from the 24 by 36 is $5.95, and the largest size that they do is 48 by 84, and that is only $24.50. $24.50. It's incredible, isn't it? But these are pretty um, not astonishing designs. It says there's more on the fourth floor, but that is the kind of thing that they were making and selling, right? And in the 1930s. Now we're talking about Kent tonight, and we're talking about his quest for much older rugs. But I thought it was interesting to find this book still in the same decade, to be able to say interesting. So if you went to your department store, in the antique section you would find the rugs that we're going to see in Ken's book. But if you were on the third floor, right, in the homewares and stuff, in the new rugs, those would be the rugs that you would see. You'd be choosing between those rugs, and that would be the kind of price bracket that you'd be looking at too. Maureen said, like the charity that helps the women in Guatemala with the rug making. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep, just like that. Karen says the top rug patterns look Art Deco-ish. Yeah, it is that time, the 20s, 30s. They look super Art Deco-ish. These are quite stylish, right? And it's interesting because they're saying a Midwestern department store. And I'm not implying that the Midwest is not chic, but I mean, it's chic now. I think the further back you go, the sort of less current the fashion would be. And yet, those rugs are very current. They're very sort of avant-garde in their design. So that is a really curious thing, too. New sewing machine would be a perfect gift. You're right, Dave. That would be a great gift. I'm always struggling for something that I need, you know. That's a good idea. Karen says the top rug is, and Maureen, yep. And Karen says Callaway Mills is in Georgia and still very much around. Oh, you're kidding. Interesting. So I'm guessing it's a fabric mill. But at this time, and I wonder if they still do manufacture rugs. That is interesting, isn't it? It crosses back to the conversation on loomed rugs, right? That came to us with this book too. This book has been the gift that keeps on giving. Now, I want to look at rugs tonight for sure, but I also want to share some of the text with you, because I mean he says some stuff that is just absolutely riveting. Not being sarcastic. So he does the mansplaining, and he does a lot of that. Hold on, I bracketed off a bunch of pages where, oh, you know what? I bet I put Kaz's clips in. I bet I got the pretty clips that Kaz gave me there. Let's see, because I disregarded the whole beginning, right? Because it was all very dated information. We might come back to it at some point, but I want to go really for the heart of the new information, because this book was very it was all brand new information at the time. This is scholarship that, you know, like I said before, Pearl McGowan was beginning to do. Ralph Burnham had done some, but this is like the, you know, earliest examples of scholarship we've seen in the field of rug making, specifically hooked rugs. So this book was really something. There's a whole chapter, and you know what's extra funny in a curious way about this book is this book, right, Hooked Rugs by W.W. Kent, the first of 3 books that he will write, all huge tomes about rug hooking and hooked rugs. The curious thing is that he is he's interested in antique rugs, and 90% of the book he's talking about antique rugs. But there's also a remarkable amount of chapter space that he gives to the technical making, which is strange to me, because you can tell by reading it that he's not a rug maker, that he has like gathered the information, kind of culled the important parts, and he records it in a very straightforward way. But there's no hint in the writing of these books that he makes rugs, right? He just knows how to make rugs. So, for example, this is one of those chapters, and this is chapter number 4. Bunch of little golden nuggets in here, and he's this chapter is called Suitable Materials and Dyeing. So 1 second while I wet my whistle. He starts off like this: good commercial burlap costs so little and is so strong and well woven that it is better to use it than old burlap after the first rug has been made. So that in itself is an insightful remark, because he's saying, like, go ahead and bust open the flour sack for that first rug, right? See if you like it. See if you're going to make a second one. If you are going to make a second one, he's suggesting that you switch to, it, obviously now this is available, right? India's been exporting burlap for some time at this point. So he's saying, go get some of that stuff from the store. It's stronger, it's more reliable. And if you've ever, and I know you have seen like commercially made contemporary burlap, it would be exactly the same as burlap from the 1930s. Very even weave, very durable, as opposed to a feed sack, like a burlap sack, like a coffee bean sack or a flour or sugar sack, something like that, potato sack, right? It's a very uneven weave. There are moments of nubbiness that's like, woo, that it's you can hook into them, without a doubt you can, but they are very rough, and they've already been quite beat up by the time you take the potatoes out of them, right? So he's saying, if you're going to make rug number two, remember everything that he says has an upper class voice. So he is assuming that everybody reading this book, and maybe it is a fair assumption, has the sort of economic situation where they would be like, oh, let's go buy some supplies tomorrow, right? He's not writing this for people who are making rugs because they are thrifty, because they need to be thrifty. He's describing rug making for people who um, have funds, right? And that in itself is a bit of an oxymoron, because it's like, wait a minute, this is a thrift craft. If people are making rugs instead of buying them at the department store, that doesn't really gel. So I'm not sure like what in his mind the purpose of these practical chapters were, but they are filled with interesting information for us. So I do a lot of paraphrasing here, but he goes on to say, heavy strands of twisted woolen yarn are excellent, but even thick cotton or jute twine and candle wicking can be used, right? So these are things I haven't heard suggested before to actually hook your rug. He's saying, let's look at that again, because that's a wacky one. Thick cotton or jute twine, right? Or candle wicking. So he's basically saying strands of anything that qualify as a fiber can be put into your rug. That would be super scrappy. Rough cloth strips often bring good effect when party colored in stripes. He's saying PARTI, party colored, like we would say multicolored now, but then it would be party colored. Party time. Party colored in stripes with dots. This is advised for certain mosaic and wavy, variegated backgrounds, queer flowers, etc. Old washed rags and newly dyed cloth bought for the purpose and dyed at home, or red and blue flannels, right? Doesn't this sound, I'm not done with this crazy sentence. Doesn't it sound like a laundry list of things that people have told him in his travels that they have hooked with? And he puts them all together in one sentence like it's supposed to make sense and flow, but even to rug hookers it doesn't make sense. Let's look at this again. So he's saying rough cloth strips, right, and the jute twine and the candle wicking um, are advised for certain mosaic and wavy variegated backgrounds, and what he means is hit or miss. Queer flowers, so not literal flowers, but fanciful flowers, right? Imaginary flowers, which is what we see in the early rugs. Old washed rags and newly dyed cloth bought for the purpose and dyed at home. Or, this is really specific, red and blue flannels, right? Red and blue flannels. He's not saying black watch. He's not saying like the red and the black. He's saying red and blue. Somebody must have said to him, oh, I have a lot of red and blue cloth. Oh, what's this in this rug? Oh, it's red and blue flannel, right? And then he writes down red and blue flannel. Old or artificially faded or secure antique tones are excellent. So, in other words, he's encouraging people to hook with material for the purpose of it in hopes of getting an antique look, so that they're making rugs that look like they're older than they are. Now, this is interesting. He's advising this, right? He's not saying that the rugs of his day, like the ones we were just looking at, that style of rug, isn't nice or isn't good. He's making that assumption that everybody would want a rug. If you're reading this book, you want a rug that is more of the antique style. That's interesting too, isn't it? Because anything you read, right, has the author's voice. Even if it's a nonfiction book like this book, right? And if it's a fiction book, same thing. You, even if it's being narrated, right? If the book is written in the voice of a narrator, you still have the author's voice in the book, right? I'm not a big fan of that because I feel like it's confusing. Like it's a party line and there's three people on it, you know. But his voice is very, very strong in his books, and it is funny. It's funny to read. Now, waste grain, more ideas. Waste green felting may be bought in strips and squares at, get ready for this, the billiard table maker's shop for about $1 a pound. Now that's unexpected. I have not heard that tip before. Go to the billiard maker, right? A little bit upper class here, right? Like everybody knows where the billiard maker is. I kind of doubt it. I picture my grandmother, right, of this generation, um, going to the billiard maker. I'm sure that never happened. But in theory, you could and pick up remnants for 25 cents a pound of this beautiful green felt. So somebody must have told him that too, right? Because he is not a hooker. Um, Interesting, isn't it? So he says, if you do that, if you get the green felt from the billiard guy, it should be boiled or cleansed, right? So that makes sense. Probably loaded with dye. Some stores now sell dyed cotton strips by the pound. Ooh, that's something we don't see nowadays. That's something that's changed. Dyed cotton strips by the pound. You know, that explains why we do see so many cotton braided rugs, multi strand braided in rugs, and toothbrush rugs from this period, right? With cotton strips. Because you often see cotton strips that look like they're pre-cut. They're probably ripped, but it might be that people were getting them by the pound at their local store. And here is the first reference in another book. This is 1930. Helen Albie's book was 1900, right on the 00. This is the first reference outside of her own book that I've ever read, where somebody mentioned her. Mrs. Albee at Pequattic, New Hampshire. Now she was in Tamworth, I know that for sure, but maybe at this time she was in Pequattic. Made her Abnaki rugs from unfinished twilled flannel, which she finally bought new in considerable quantities, as related in her interesting book. And then he doesn't say what the name of the book is, but we know because we have it. We've looked at it on this show. Old woolen and cotton or mill rejected stockings are excellent in strips of 1 inch, 1 inch wide, and there is nothing better when cut okay, here it comes. Nothing better when cut spirally round and round, and all cloth works better when cut evenly. Okay, so this is a wacky one. So he's saying uh, these materials that he's suggesting, cut them spirally round and round. Now, I have to admit, I don't get it. I don't get it. Um, he's saying in the same sentence, all cloth works better when it's cut evenly. Well, it's more uniform, right? I don't know that it's better, but it's more uniform. Um, and of course, the emphasis was on technical prowess at this time. It wasn't on creativity, although creativity scored high. Things being technically correct were important. So the part about cutting it spirally round and round, that I just don't get what that's a reference to. Maybe just specifically the stockings. He must be talking about, it's in the same sentence where he talks about cotton or mill rejected. You know, I think he is talking about stockings. Old woolen or cotton or mill. No, he's talking about all three. Or mill rejected stockings are excellent in strips. Okay, he must be saying with the stockings to cut them spirally round and round. Interesting. That's interesting. I always cut mine like calamari the short way because I double them up to hook with them. Once in a blue moon, I cut it the long way, but normally I cut it like calamari into rings. But he's saying you should cut it round and round like an ongoing. I wonder, I wonder because the Grenfell rugs are made of stockings, right? That's the whole prestige of the Grenfell rug. I wonder if the Grenfell rugs are made by cutting the stockings. Does anybody know? In a spiral, like it sounds like coring an apple, doesn't it? Oh, let me catch up a little bit here. Dawn, great to see you. Happy Friday. And Karen says a lot of old men's pajamas were red or blue flannel. Maybe that's what he's referring to. Yeah, that makes sense, doesn't it? Flannel does hook up remarkably well. I have to say that's why I love going to the Vermont Flannel Company. There's one on the main street in Woodstock, but they also sell online, and you can get a giant bag of flannel strips, and they do hook up really nicely, really nicely. They would also braid up really nicely too for a toothbrush rug or a multi-strand or a traditional braid. So interesting. And then he goes on to say cotton cloth cut thus, spiral, and not on the bias will make a beautiful unclipped rug, but wears flatter and dirtier than wool, although often very beautiful in tone, even when faded, old, and worn. So he is sticking with the spiral cut for the cotton. I just don't understand that because obviously cotton has a width, right? You can't. How do you spiral it? I don't understand. That might just be lost in translation kind of a thing. As to silks and velvets, they may be used for certain parts, but silk wears poorly and is not often found in good rugs, while velvet is somewhat expensive and hard to get in the form of rags. Jute and wool yarn are frequently used, especially in Canada and Scotland. I have to say, that is the most thorough um, discussion on materials that I have ever read. So, and what's confusing about this, not just the spiral, what's confusing is that he's talking about antique rugs and he's saying, um, yeah, the velvets don't wear well, the silks don't wear well, but they are present, right? Because people had them and they cut them up and they were there. They were present in the early rugs, but they don't wear well. See, he's straddling this weird line of conversation where he's both talking about doing a survey of past rugs, historic rugs, and giving you tips to make rugs today. So it's difficult because um, if you read this book, right, and I skipped over it, but in the first chapter, the description is like build a frame. It has wood, it has nails at the corner, build it. Get a nail, bend it, and mount it in a wooden handle. And it's like, okay, I mean, that's okay maybe for 1930, but for today, I'm still stuck on like, get the wood, right? Like, what wood? Like, what sized wood? Like, it's very different, right? People so much more capable in general back then, just whacking things together. He gives very little sort of blueprint detail as to like how to make a frame, how to make a hook, how to actually get started. And it's the same sort of type and tone of conversation when he talks about material. It's like, okay, well, these are things that people can use. Could use this. You could use this. And I think his whole conversation is bent on um, trying to get you to make a rug that looks antique because that's where his heart is, right? He's only into the antique rugs. So in that regard, it all makes sense. But it's a very meandering conversation he has with himself while he has one foot in both camps, the how to book and the history of book, right? So then he gets into a conversation on dyes. And he talks about several books. I'm going to have to check to see if I have these books. Some of them I don't recognize the name of. Helen Albie's book, right? We just talked about that. I do have that one. And to remember, years ago, I made the Helen Albie color set. And although none of the book is in color and there isn't a single image of a rug in Helen Albie's book, at the end of the book, there are her recipes. And I tried to follow her recipes as close as I could to create the colors that she used. And I put out the Abenaki color swatch set, and all of those colors are available individually too. And at least in having done that, it gave me a visual of what her color palette was. So that was handy. So I know we have that book, and we've talked about that book. He also mentions Charles E. Pellew, Pellew, book on dyes and dyeing. I'm going to have to check to see if I have that one. Elizabeth Calvert Hall's Handwoven Coverlets. So that is a coverlets book, but apparently it contains a section on dyeing. Amy Malley Hicks, and we certainly have talked about her and her book, The Art of Handmade Rugs. It does have a small section on dyeing too. most books from this period, the 20s and 30s, do have a section on dyeing. Kent goes here into, oh, hang on. He's about to go into an incredible conversation on color. I want to do a little bit of that together. Another note that I bracketed off in the late Mrs. Elizabeth Lounsbury's article in Harper's Bazaar, and of course, he doesn't tell you what year or issue of Harper's Bazaar, but in Mrs. Elizabeth Lounsbury's article, the article is called The Native American Rug. In that article, she says, and this is a quote from Harper's Bazaar, the principal home dyes of the period were derived, so she's talking about the 19th century, were derived from hemlock bark, yellow hickory, peach leaves, walnut or spruce bark. Goldenrod was also employed for making yellow, set with copperas, also onion skins, set with alum, and sumac for soft gray. So he has done a very thorough survey on, he's collected and synthesized a lot of information. We know he was a big one for Antiques Magazine, also Harper's Bazaar. He's been collecting books of that period. He's done a lot of research. And these three books that he puts out are the sort of culmination of having gathered and culled that much information. It's a lot. He was truly a scholar. And he goes on to talk about the different colors and saying, you know, depending on where you are in North America, where you might get this color. For example, red, alder, bedstraw, bloodroot, cedar, cranberry, dogwood, elm, grape, Gromwell. Oh, I was thinking of Wallace and Gromit. Sorry. Gromwell, never heard that word before. Hemlock, hooked crowfoot, don't know that one either. Lamb's quarters, maple. Some of these I have never heard of. Have you? Maybe it's just lamb's quarters, maple, sorrel, spruce root, sumac, and tamarack. And then for yellow, alder, barberry, beech, blue beech, crab apple, goldenrod, golden seal, golden thread, hickory marsh marigold, oak, poplar. He goes on and on. Touch me not, touch me not. That must be a flower. Willow. It's a bit of an erotic name for a flower, isn't it? It's very specific, isn't it? It's very specific. Touch me not, sunflower. So he goes through every color: black, orange, green, purple. Purple is only blueberry, elderberry, huckleberry, and brown is only alder, butternut, oak, and walnut. Blue is only grape, larkspur, oak, spruce bark, sycamore, toad flax. So yellow is a biggie. The red was a biggie. Interesting, right? Interesting. So at this time, this list of sources for colors for a lot of people would have been like, holy mackerel, right? But then who was buying this book in 1930? That's the other question. I'm assuming it was in a lot of libraries, right? And people were borrowing it and writing down what they needed to know about what materials to use, how to do it, baby, and what you might look for in your garden to get a specific color. But the book is not in color with the exception of that first plate. So he can only describe. He's very good at describing stuff. He's very lyrical in the way that he describes stuff. Judy says Grommel is an old-fashioned name for borage. I also don't know I also don't know borage. I've got to get with the program, right? Out of doors. I've got to leave the house and get with the program. I got to figure out. Thank you for that, Judy. I'm gonna have to look up both. I'm gonna have to look it up and look at what it looks like. But it is a beautiful romantic name. That's the thing about this list of names, isn't it? It's so romantic. It's like it's like a magic witch's recipe book, but it's very benign because we're talking about these beautiful mellow colors that these things will produce. Um, this was one of the best. Okay, he talks for quite a while. This I thought was just interesting. I don't know if you knew this, a bit of trivia. The butternut was prepared by boiling. So he has a lot of anecdotes in here too. That's why the book is so long. The butternut was prepared by boiling the inside bark and the nut rinds with the wool, which was to be woven into homespun. Sometimes, the homespun is like what they're making on looms at home. Uh, hold for the rest. Sometimes the brown was varied by adding walnut bark and black as a result. This was what was best this was one of the best known and most popular dyes, and so many of the Confederate soldiers were dressed in homespun covered with colored with butternut dye, and that is why they are called butternuts, right? Um, Confederate soldiers often referred to as butternuts. That is a phrase I think most people have heard, but that is the reason, right? That their clothing actually was colored from butternuts. That is an interesting little tidbit. I think I knew that once upon a time and then I forgot. So it was very nice to reconnect with that fact. You never know. You never know. Sitting at trivia night, right? Um, oh, Maureen says borage is an herb that you plant near strawberries. It is a coarse plant with big leaves. Oh, it sounds so beautiful. Gosh, that sounds pretty with light violet flowers. Oh, that sounds so pretty. I wonder why is it such a good companion with strawberries? Is there a reason for that? That's so interesting. Um, it is well to be sure of enough material for each intended color. Get ready for some really vague talk here. So he's about to tell you what he's telling you is that you should try to figure out how much you need for each section. So if you're making butternuts whatever, or you're doing something with the touch me not and that color, and he's saying make sure you have enough of the color when you're dyeing it, but he never tells you how much enough is. This is what he says. It is well to be sure of enough material for each intended color surface before beginning a rug. It is true that some excellent, indeed surpassingly fine rugs have been made from small batches of cloth, one used when another color gave out until a desirable oriental effect was secured, even if not known by this name to the maker. But if this is to be done, a pattern of small details should be prepared. So a lot of small spaces if you don't want to run out, in other words. Although on backgrounds or fields, many varying colors may be wisely used. So this is the extent of the description. To calculate how much will be needed, get ready for this. Before beginning the rug, estimate that 1 square foot of rug surface will use up a dozen or less times as many square feet of cloth. If you're thinking, I didn't get that, I didn't either. I read it about 100 times. He's saying 1 square foot of rug surface will use up a dozen, right? We say now about four, on the safe side, 4 times as much material as if you're doing something the size of this book, you want something 4 times the size of this book. He's saying a dozen times the size or less times. A dozen times or less times. That is the measurement. Or less times as many square feet of cloth. Sorry. So this would not, that part would not have been particularly helpful. What is that? What is that? Little, okay, little something, not a bug. Um, so there are those moments, and yeah, they are funny and quaint, but probably infuriating for the person sitting at the library who is exhausted, just got away from the children, just got away from everything, is thinking, here I am at the library, open the dang book, tell me how to make the dang rug, and then he says to use 12 times more material than the surface space or less. And you maybe go back 5 times and read it and think, I still don't get it. What's wrong with me? I bet that happened to a lot of people. He talks about, if you notice, he's not using the expression hit or miss. Now, I don't know, and I would love to find out when people started using the expression hit or miss, because I would assume that hit or miss is a sort of Depression era expression, right? It is one of those kinds of simple, oversimplified slogans of that era. It sounds like that to me. Hit or miss, right? It's either a hit or it's going to be a miss, right? It is what it is. You get what you get. I would think that that expression dates to this period, but he doesn't use it, right? Or he hasn't used it so far. He equates. We've heard him say party colored, right? Um, and we're about to, when we're talking about a hit or miss background and a busy pattern in the background, he's struggling to find language um, to come up with an expression for what sounds to me like a hit or miss background. So he's about to invent another expression that won't be a lasting one that we don't use now. So don't file it in the front of your brain because it's not going to be helpful. We don't use it anymore. But he tries to introduce in this chapter the expression mosaic for doing like a hit or miss background. Like I guess because he's thinking of it in terms of pieces, right? The breakdown of pieces, independent parts, right, that don't blend. I get that maybe mosaic is a good word for that. So he says, those who have, this is a bit pretentious, those who have studied ancient mosaics, right, and the housewife who's sitting in the library right now from the page before going, you jerk, you jerk. For those who have studied ancient mosaics know how the old mosaic craftsmen, I won't do that, that's not fair, because I'm sure he was a very nice man, how the old mosaic craftsmen, Oriental, Roman, early Christian, and Italian, that's another laundry list, isn't it? Appreciated and used this same idea of following one line of background by another around the pattern. So he's talking about echoing something, right? He sometimes calls it agate, like this, like the stone with all of the echoes, right, of lines around the central motif. In the case of a stone, right, it's just kind of a irregular shape with rings upon rings, right? So he sometimes uses the word agate for that effect, and now he's introducing mosaic, but he's going to build on it. He says this grew possibly at first from the ease of the operation, which obviated too frequent mosaic cutting, but it led in the hands of the artist. Hold on, let me paraphrase. He talks about Ravenna, right? The mosaics of Ravenna. The method is emphasized. Okay, let me paraphrase this. So he's talking at a very highbrow voice about the composition of mosaics, right? And trying to put that together with the idea that they are pieced, right? It's you're piecing something together, but yet there is an overarching look to the whole thing, and it's a unified look. He's saying what people are doing in the background of hooked rugs is akin to mosaics, but in cloth, right? He actually italicizes the phrase mosaics in cloth, right? If it were nowadays, some jerk would want to be like copywriting that phrase, mosaics in cloth. Maybe not a jerk, but you know, it is a good tag, isn't it? It's a good tag. Not exactly good for what we do, right? But good for what someone else is doing, right? Someone who's doing something that's real specific, like postage stamp quilts, right? Something like, that would be the perfect use of mosaics and cloth. And long ago, certain hooked rugs were called. So, okay, and he's making this claim. Long ago, certain hooked rugs were called mosaics in England. That's not a correct statement because he's talking about those Coptic rugs again, and those were definitely sewn. But he's on to, he feels he's on to something here. Sometimes it's hard to tell with Kent whether he's making valuable and astute comments that are useful about the construction of anti-cook drugs, or if he's bragging about how much he's traveled. Sometimes it's really, really hard to tell what he's doing. The study of mosaics in general, especially the Byzantine colors and patterns, helps amazingly in hooked rug making and is advisable. These suggestions of the possibilities which lie in the treaty. So he then goes on to talk about Persian art in a nutshell, floral design in Persian art. So this is a tough chapter, and I'm skipping over almost all of it because he's saying some things that are interesting, and he is applying his knowledge of art, which is vast, to the construction of early hooked rugs, right? And this is he's kind of leading his way up to that last chapter that we have already looked at. What are the sources of inspiration for people who designed their own rugs before commercial patterns, right? He's already pre-programmed himself. He's already talked himself into the idea that people used Byzantine mosaics in the study of preparing a hooked rug, right? So he already believes this by the time we get to the last chapter. So I put the cart before the horse with the whole conversation in this book, but it is interesting to know that and to think that. To me, my personal opinion is it feels like he's trying to hammer a square peg into a circle hole. He wants these early hooked rugs to be antique with impossible charm, quaint, thrifty, folky. We're not using that word yet either. But he also wants the people who make them to have a working knowledge of like a Byzantine mosaic, right? It doesn't actually make sense, does it? It's not likely, but it is all part of this conversation that he's having with himself. Let's see. First time I heard of butternut. Oh, let me catch up here. Maureen says about the what was it called, barrage and the strawberries. The barrage helps the soil near the strawberries. Oh, interesting. See, a whole other world. Oh, that's so cool. That sounds so pretty too. The strawberries next to this lilac colored plant with little lilac flowers on it. Catherine says, first time I heard butternut and Confederate soldier uniform in the same sentence. Okay. Yeah, I think the only reason I had heard butternut, I think, was because I was a tour guide, right? That tends to happen. We repeat those things over and over. Karen says, etymology of the phrase hit or miss. Okay, Karen, thank you, is circa 1600 according to Google. I believe it. Just because Kent doesn't use it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. It might be that he was aware of the phrase and it just wasn't the kind of phrase that he liked to use, right? Because he is an upper class person, right? And I'm guessing that at this time, working in a hit or miss style could have been called a lot of different things from region to region. That would be something I'd be really interested in finding out. I wish there were more early books on rug hooking so that we could say, well, people in Maine tended to say hit or miss. Well, they didn't because Kent was from Maine. But people in whatever, or people in other places tended to say mosaic. And, it would be really cool to be able to have that information as part of the story written in stone. What purpose does it serve? No actual purpose. It's our history, isn't it? And it all matters. I mean, it all matters to me. Um, Catherine said, I saw the Ravenna mosaics up front and personal in Italy. Oh, you are lucky. You are lucky. I've only ever seen them in pictures. Lillian, great to see you. Happy Friday night and welcome. Have a sip. I want to look at just the rest of this chapter, then I want to look at some of the rugs that were in this chapter. He haphazardly puts rugs in, with the exception of, let me show you this image actually, because normally they're just scattered throughout, and the conversation in the chapter doesn't really reflect what the plate is about. You know what I mean? We're going to see these as bigger plates, but let me just show you in this chapter the conversation about the mosaic rug, right? This is his example of the mosaic rug. And it does have a bit of a log cabin checker, right? But it has it's intermittent florals, right? It's balanced out. This is called Large Antique Hooked Rug. Very interesting old piece with all over design, white medallions, each with an apricot colored flower and 4 gray leaves. Oh, how pretty is that? Apricot colored flower and 4 gray leaves. Black and gray mottled ground. So it's a dark. The dark part is hit or miss, right? And he's suggesting that the inspiration is, do you see this tiny little mosaic? Right, mosaic in baptistry, Ravenna, showing, I'm reading backwards, mosaic lines of one color following another color. So is there a relationship between a mosaic and a hit or miss pattern? Honest to God, I don't think so. I mean, I don't think so because I'm picturing the people who made hooked rugs, right? They mosaic schmosaic. I mean, I personally don't think so. But it's his opinion that there could be a relationship, that this could have been one of the great inspirations, right, of the hit or miss style. I can't say that it wasn't, but it doesn't make much common sense. And now let's finish up this chapter because this is an interesting like current bit of news he gives us. In the very last paragraph of this chapter, he says, lately, there has come to the writer's notice the blue-nose rug hooker that is possibly a comparatively modern invention. Now, it wasn't. It wasn't. It was at least 40 years old at this point. All good. Thank you for asking. Hold on one second. Just checking on the wine. The blue nose hooker, possibly a comparative. Let's talk about covering your butt. Possibly a comparatively modern invention. So no, we can put these much earlier. We can put these shuttle type devices to the 1880s. The claim made for this is that it is a rapid working needle or implement that ensures a firm, even nap for the yarn rug by making all loops uniform. This is called by the maker a hooker, but I would say it is of the broading type of implement. Okay, broading. So broad is another word for proddy, right? But he's using, for whatever reason, broading is the going phrase where he is from at this time. So it is a broading type of implement descended from the old broad, origin brad, or prod, but made of wood, or bone or metal, and used in England, Scotland, and elsewhere many years ago. So he clearly doesn't understand what the blue nose is, because we've seen the blue nose, right? The blue nose is an all metal shuttle. It's a shuttle that has the two pieces, like the plates of the earth, going tick, 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 tick. You have to hold it with two hands, and it's all metal. It's the dog thought I was calling him. Oh, honey, I just did tick, 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 tick. It's not a wooden one, but it works exactly the same way. It has a big tip that goes and it walks along the surface on its own. If you do tick, tick, it walks, right? And it hooks quite fast. And unless you're very good, it's much easier to do geometrics, but not very easy to do curves, right? And subtle lines. But has obviously not seen a blue nose, and this is very strange in and of itself. He has not seen the blue nose, because it's not just the blue nose at this point. There are patents, right, in the late 1800s, many patents for shuttle type needles, and we're not saying punch yet. We're saying there are different kinds of hooks and needles. But there's lots of patents, and they're all almost identical and interchangeable, but lots of individual patents. You can look them up online. There's tons. So it's so strange to me that for all of the driving around that he did, for all of the gathering of info that he did, and putting together this incredible amount of history that is, for the in large part, opinion, but to be fair, you can tell when it's opinion. The rest of it is quite solid. This person, Kent, never saw somebody using this tool, because there are so many versions of this tool at this point that it is crazy. We have already in the 1930s gone from the shuttle punch to the predecessor of, like, the craftsman style punch, the predecessor of the Oxford punch, right? We've gone to a single needle, held in one hand needle. So it's so curious to me that he didn't know this, because he's describing it as a proddy tool, something that you hold in one hand and just press down. And it's definitely not that, but that is exactly how he just described that. So that's interesting, isn't it? Because I think the way that it must have been described to him is that when you're using it, it pushes the material down. So you're working the back side. The working side is the reverse. And if it was described to him that way, and he'd never seen the thing being used, he would think it was proddy, wouldn't he? He would think it was proddy. That conversation whoever he got this info from about the blue nose, that must have been a conversation laden with confusion, because he gathered what he could gather, and he still walked away with a huge misconception that we were talking about proddy, and we know that those shuttles are not for that purpose. Let's look at some rugs for a while. I just want to get us ready for the next time we open this book on Monday. Let me go to the next text. Well, Kaz, I'm just going to look at where the next clip is, so I know what we're going to go to next time. Oh, yeah. Oh, that's very good. Let's definitely go there next time. Here, let me put this in here with that so it stands out. Let's look at some of the rugs that are in these early chapters. Oh, I also love violet flowers. Oh, any flowers, particularly right now, right? Everything's coming up. Roses and otherwise. All right, let's come over here. And, we started to look at some of the images that he put in this chapter. And do you remember we said last time, he gets a lot of images from Antiques Magazine, right? But he takes a lot himself, to be fair. He takes a lot of images of rugs that he finds, and I think rugs that he buys, rugs that he owns and has collected. We said in the last couple of episodes that, everything else aside, right? He's got some misinformation happening, but he's certainly it's a huge A for effort. I mean, this is a very important book. It's a landmark book. One thing that cannot be argued about Kent was that he had an incredible eye for a hooked rug. An incredible eye. There are so many early hooked rugs that, although they are lovely, right? There's not always a lot to say about them. Oh, more flowers. He seems to have instinctively it found the ones that were had something very special and different going on. So, for example, let's look at this one. This has got a lot of special and different stuff happening. Another funny example, just first glance, right? The shape of the motif in the center, right? With the very pronounced scrolls going outward, north and south, and inward, east and west. That in itself is super curious, right? I can't think of another rug that employs this device. It makes for a small negative area on the two sides, but the top and bottom it has a larger background area, and he has used his inner shape, which is kind of like a rough kind of horseshoe shape. He has separated shapes with the four scrolls are holding in that center section, right? That light field is being contained by four scrolls, but these are some of the strangest looking scrolls I have ever seen. It's not that they're bad; they are just very, very different. It almost looks like a dinosaur hybrid mixed with a centipede, right? Like there's something curious about the way that these scrolls look. It's very, very different. Obviously, whoever made this rug understood that scrolls were good and that they went on the around the edges of your center medallion, and they were present in the corners of a good rug. So this person did that, but man, did they do it differently than any other example I've seen before. So scrolls are very different, very naive. You can't say they're good, but they are different, right? That would give value to this rug because they're that much different than other everybody else on Earth's example of a scroll so far. Now, they didn't just do the scroll around the edge of that light field. They also carried the scroll into the dark border. So essentially, the scroll is split from light to dark. And they did a lot of shading, right? Like almost like the hit or miss shading. It looks very pretty and lacy around the black border. Let me open the book and see if I can find. It is very naive. See if I can find this exact one because I want to see if he wrote something, and I want us to be kind of on. Oh, there it is, kind of on the same page, literally. What did he say? Early American medallion hooked rug, pale blue oval medallion occupied by long bouquet of crimson and pink roses and buds, deep leaf scrollings of mulberry at corners. This is 4 foot 5 inches by 2 foot 8 inches. So the scrolling is definitely different, right? There was no attempt to do shadow on the inside of the scrolling, just on that dark border. Now, while the border is technically, I mean, it does look very lacy and it's very pretty and different. I wouldn't say that it's exceptionally well done. It's not consistent. The shape is very, very different. And different is good, right? Different is good for collectors. But it is different than other rugs at that time looked like, right? I feel like the scroll has been hijacked by this person, and they've kind of screwed it up a little bit, right? Just the idea. But having said that, for as odd as the scroll is, the flowers are exceptionally good. Three flowers. Don't the flower compared to the naivete of the scroll part? Don't the flowers look like somebody was sitting with like a print of roses, or actual, probably not actual flowers, but probably a print, or looking at wallpaper or a bedspread with roses? Doesn't it look like somebody was looking at something and shading it accordingly? Because the level of difficulty and skill that is demonstrated in the flowers, and even the device of having that straight stick, very sort of Asian looking, right? All those sorts of bamboo and lattice designs, that straight branch, right? That the flowers are going right through. It doesn't make any logical sense, but it is quite beautiful. And it has that nice symmetrical spray of leaves on both sides. That looks to me like it was taken directly from something someone was looking at, because it's perfect. It's perfect. Now, for collectors, some, it's a moving target at this moment because collectors aren't that big into hooked rugs at this moment. That's good for us, but it's not good for the future of rugs, right? If people are throwing them out, they're not making nearly as much as they used to make in, like, for example, the 80s. But when we're looking at this rug, let's say that we are the collectors and we're at an auction. Wouldn't that be rough? If we were all at an auction, oh my God, there'd be a lot of crying oneself to sleep at night. I'm sure I'd be doing a lot of crying. Um, the question would be, is this a, nowadays, this is an antique rug for sure. This is a 19th century rug. Would a rug like this be valuable? It's really going to be us. It's going to be like the central nervous system, the nucleus of people who are the most into rug hooking, right? Who will um, eventually decide what rugs are the most valuable, because we're snapping up all the ones that people at Sotheby's auctions aren't snapping up. We're snapping up the garage sale rugs and the antique store rugs and the antique center rugs. That's us, right? It's maybe you also shop at the Sotheby's auctions, but I'm not bidding on the rugs that go for 10,000 or 20,000. I'm getting all the other rugs. And when people aren't buying all of the other rugs, I bet you the dealers are throwing them out or giving them to Goodwill. I bet they're throwing them out. So essentially, the conversation about rugs is going to come down to us, because I think we're buying more rugs than collectors are buying, right? The sort of middle and low priced rugs are probably selling in way bigger numbers than the high end rugs. So it'll be up to us to decide, is this a valuable rug or not? In my mind, and we all make up our minds, according to our own taste and conscience. In my mind, this is a valuable rug because there is the major interest happening here in the two different styles. I think it's one maker, but I think it shows such a naive approach to, I'm using this word tons, right, Linda? Um, to rug making, right? Because they're definitely copying something. In my mind, they're definitely copying the flowers, but they don't seem to have a reference for the scrolls. So they're just going seat of the pants and figuring it out as they go along, maybe based on memory, maybe just designing as they go. But it creates a very, very different rug that brings up more questions than it answers. And the things about these rugs that Kent has chosen, they are all exceptional in at least one way, if not many ways. He knew that in 1930. There's a reason why he collected them and he chose these for this book. This is early American raised medallion hooked rug, so this has height. Raised medallion hooked rug, orange yellow diamond medallion. Ooh, picture that. Orange yellow. Ooh. With sprays of raised crimson pink flowers. Well, I don't know if that goes. That is really crazy colors, isn't it? Triangular black corners with sprays of similar flowers. So in the corners, the flowers are all red and pink, but the corners are black, and the center is like a yellow orange, like a squash color. Interesting. 4 foot 7 inches by 2 foot 6 inches. Now, this is another very simple composition. This is a serious attempt at symmetry, and the maker's done quite well, right? The two branches that are kind of interlacing, one up, one down, one straggly, very wavy little branch, right, coming off at the same place on both. Very good. Nice diamond set in the center. It sounds like really nice colors. And then a repeat of the same flower in the corners, right? The flower is quite pretty. It seems to be a bud, not a flower. So that in itself is interesting because, we say it's a flower rug, and it is, but it does appear to be a bud, doesn't it? The two center ones, I don't know, because it's an odd shape. Maybe it's just kind of a rose about to unfold kind of a thing. But it's a neat piece. It's cute. It's very symmetrical. It's very well done. It's simple. I think with this rug, the value would be in its simplicity. It's a great design. There's nothing wrong with this design. The hit or miss quality that I'm imagining in both that orange yellow field and the black around the edge is extraordinary. I'm just looking at a black and white photo, right, from a 1930 book. And I can tell just by looking at it, I can feel like an underground stream, like under my feet. I can feel the motion. I can feel the energy just looking at it. It's not static. It's not solid. It's got a lot of hit or miss business, or not hit or miss, color changing business happening, right? Running out of colors, putting more colors in. I can't see it in color. I can only imagine it in color, but it seems like this rug would be absolutely exquisite. Color wise, really different, right? The orange yellow, that's really, really different. For me, orange yellow and pink and red don't go together well. But without being able to look at this rug in person, I hope it still exists. I just don't know. It might be absolutely beautiful, but it would be a striking looking rug at the very least. Karen says all of these rug images are courtesy of Antiques Magazine. Is that his magazine? No, he obviously had a buddy at that magazine who he was close to, because I forget her name, Gretchen something, right? He references her a lot. A lot of these are his magazine, are his own photos, but I know this woman. I think her name was Gretchen. I named her like a week ago because I was reading the article on her. But he was very close to this woman, and at least professionally. I'm not suggesting anything, but at least professionally, and they shared a lot of info and images, right, for his book projects too. I also know that in the 1920s, right, so this might have been same timeline overlap or just eclipsed the era of the former editor, who I'm never going to be able to think of his name, but it was a man who was editing Antiques Magazine definitely in the 1920s, maybe before, maybe a little bit after, and he was specifically a hooked rug collector. And that is the reason why in rug hooking, in Antiques Magazine, during the 1920s in particular, you see a lot of images of hooked rugs because it was like his special area of expertise in his pet collection, like personally. So that's kind of spilled over into the pages of this magazine because he was the editor. So I think for that reason, probably it started, that I'm just guessing, that Kent became close to the people who ran Antiques Magazine because of this shared passion for collecting. Maybe the collecting world at that time was quite small. Um, Interesting. But then a lot of them are courtesy of this woman who writes a lot of articles in these early 20th century decades of Antiques Magazine, and she's specifically interested in hooked rugs too. So it just seems to be like a circle of friends things that they're all kind of sharing information. Judy says it would be so cool to know where some of these rugs are today. I know. Oh, wait a minute. DuPont. Remember the other day I was trying to think of the name? DuPont isn't a vacuum, isn't it? Why did I have the association of a vacuum? The DuPont house. I forget where it is. Is that on the lakes, on the Great Lakes? That house houses a huge collection of hooked rugs that are important hooked rugs. And yeah, Judy, it would be amazing to find out where some of these rugs are. I love looking at them as often as possible together, because the more we look at them, right? If someone sees one and goes, "I know I've seen that rug before," it could happen, right? Oh God, it would be so much fun to be able to find, for example, this rug, because it's such crazy colors. It could be 100 years later, it could be quite faded, but it would be so much fun to find. Gaynor says, Deanna, this is so interesting. Oh, sure thing. This is all Kent. I'm just running my mouth, and I'm trying to pull out the best parts. But I mean, the writing in this book is so, it's such a moment in time. It's such a great window into hooking at this time. And these choices, this is one I know I have in ribbon candy hooking. This is a quite famous rug. This one you can see, so this one is one of the few that is not Antiques Magazine, courtesy of Mrs. Hayden Richardson. And the caption says, "Very old and beautiful rug at the sign of the motor car in Dennis, Cape Cod." The sign of the motor car. Now, I'm very familiar with the Cape and lived on the Cape, but I don't know the sign of the motor car. And I'm wondering, maybe this is something I can find out this summer. I know that that big museum in Sandwich has it's several museums in one museum. If you've been, you know what I'm talking about. Um, it's not the Glass Museum, right? I think it's just called the Sandwich. I'll have to figure it out. I think it's just called the Sandwich Museum. There's a sub museum in there that's like carousels, like carousel horses, and there's a sub museum in there that's on cars, like the history of cars. And I'm wondering if the sign of the motor car used to be a destination. Um, I don't know, but I'm going to try to figure it out. But this very beautiful old rug at the sign of the motor car, Dennis, Cape Cod. I would love to know what the sign of the motor car was. It's obviously a place. Suppose it could be a tavern, right? And there's like a motor car on the sign of the motor car. I guess it has to be a tavern, do you think? It's such an odd name, isn't it? The sign of the motor car, Dennis, Cape Cod. This one has an ivory field, dark brown vase, grapes, lavender, red and purple grape leaves. Stems are dark green. Oh, this is very colorful. Pale flowers near vase, pale blue outline, big flowers on vase top, orange and red outline, bell flowers at the right. This goes on and on and on. He obviously esteemed this rug hugely because he's going into incredible detail to describe it. God, I wish we could see this one too. This sounds like such a beautiful, colorful rug. And this, this they're calling it a vase, but it has more of a chalice shape, doesn't it? It is a very curious shape for a vase, but really a beautiful, exquisite piece, and it's very clear. Um, Thanks, Madison. That one was so pretty. This maybe you mean this one is amazing. DuPont. Thank you, Karen. Is in Wilmington, Delaware. Oh, that's not very far. Interesting. Well, he obviously loved this rug. Imagine if there was. Oh, it's dream time. Imagine if there was a tavern in Dennis on Cape Cod, which is a beautiful town right on the water. Well, Dennisport is on the water. Imagine if there was this place, a tavern. Well, it could also be a tea room. I wonder if it was a tea room. I bet you it was a restaurant, kind of a place. The sign of the motor car, and if you went in there, you would maybe order your food or your tea or your sandwich, and you would see this extraordinary rug. And what do you think? I'm guessing that if Mrs. Hayden Richardson had this rug, which was obviously Kent regards this as being a very valuable rug in the 1920s. I bet she had other rugs too. Oh, I wonder if it was on the floor. Oh boy, suspicious minds, right? It is just an extraordinarily pretty rug, a great example of a very highly successful design that has to some degree some symmetry, right? But it goes off the rails quite a bit and shows us lots of different kinds of flowers. This must be an extraordinary thing to look at. And oh, okay. I was going to say now for something completely different. Well, this is quite different. Sorry about the bad photograph, but this is this is about 1 inch big inside the book. But I still wanted to share it. Um, it says very heavy cotton rug of Persian character, designed and made by Mrs. Davis of Forest City, New Brunswick. So this must have been, and it is, I'm sorry, out of focus. It's not you, it's just the book, the tiny size of it and quality. So this was designed and made by Mrs. Davis Forest of New Brunswick. Do you think that this is one of the rugs that um, oh God, I gotta check that comment. My heart started racing. Do you think this is one of the rugs that when he took that motor trip to Canada that he had in the boot of the car on the way home? I think it must have been, don't you? I mean, I don't know how many times he did that motor trip to Canada, but he knows who made it. And remember when we looked at this book a week ago, we started with the story of the motor trip. And remember, he said he filled up the whole boot of the car with all of the rugs that he found, but it was hard to find them because the area was pretty much picked dry. But he went from farmhouse to farmhouse asking people if they had any rugs to sell. And he said in a lot of the farmhouses, people were very happy to sell the rugs that they already had down on the floor. I would bet you anything that this is one of them that he found on this trip because he knows who the maker was, right? And it's from Canada. So let's carry this conversation just a little bit further by saying this is not Persian in character at all. Like, let's first talk about the design of the rug. It is oh God, this is an extraordinary rug. It's got like the lollipop flowers, right? It tries to be symmetrical. It's more of a golden rectangle shape. It's almost a square, so it's not the hearth rug size that we see more often. Really, really cute. Very kind of stringy, right? It's like these weird, like thistly pom pom flowers, very Dr. Seuss on stems with lots of little fronds and leaves and tiny, tiny little leaves, right? Really unusual skeleton to the flowers, right? And then these big round flowers popped on top of each stem. Now, that in itself, very unusual, very odd, very noteworthy and different. But the background, right? There is a circle, so there's a distinction and a separation made between the sort of medallion center and the border. And it's not regular, it's not well done, it's not particularly well executed, but there is a line, right? There has been some kind of a divide made there. And there's a dark line that separates, but then the person hooked, hit or miss. Now, we can't really tell what colors they are because he doesn't say at all. So he just says who made it. So it could be that in terms of the values, the color values in black and white, it looks interchangeable. The inner motif in the medallion and the outer border, they look interchangeable to me in terms of the value. It looks like people were using the same hit or miss colors. I might be wrong. It might be that it's just darks on the outside, but it doesn't look like that, does it? It's a very, very, very curious piece, right? Because why bother with making that medallion shape if you're not actually going to make a border? Maybe they just didn't have enough darks, right? Maybe something happened and they just didn't have enough, or they just didn't realize that there was supposed to be a more distinct color change from the border to the medallion center. Who knows? It doesn't matter. What matters is that it's so different for this reason. He was so lucky to get this rug. Now he's calling it a Persian rug. Remember the conversation from earlier where we were saying he was really searching for words that would describe a hit or miss background, but he's not saying hit or miss. And he's using the word mosaic and Persian almost interchangeably. I think the reason he's calling this a Persian style rug, and this is weird because he would, as a traveler, right, as a lover of art, he would know what Persian style rugs look like. Maybe he's thinking the flowers look a little bit Persian, but he has already established the language in this book of saying that something that is done in the mosaic style, which we now say is hit or miss, is the Persian style. So to him, this is a classic example of a Persian rug because it's a hit or miss rug. So interesting because even though the language changes, right, because there is nothing Persian about this rug, he is at least consistent, right? Here it comes. Here's our Persian rug. It has a hit or miss background, just like he described several chapters earlier. I mean, isn't that interesting? He's very consistent. I'm dying to get over here to these comments. Hang on. Cynthis P said, when you Google it, there's a vintage photo showing a small house. I'm going to do showing a small house. Karen says, exactly. Judy says, it's a pretty little house. And Cynthis P says, I think it was a cafe. I always have my phone shut off now so we don't get interference. I'm dying to look at that now. I'm going to have to check that out. I can tell you for sure it's not been there. It's not been there in my lifetime because I graduated from high school out there. It's definitely not there now. But I wonder if the building's there. Wouldn't it be great to do a rug? Oh, Judy says there is a Dennis Historical Society newsletter referring to it as a place to stop for lunch. The sign invites house guests, but it looks so tiny. Oh, I wonder if it's a little Cape Cod style house, like one of those little teeny tiny guys. Gosh, that sounds fantastic. Oh, that sounds fantastic. Maybe we're going to be over there at the end of May. Maybe I'll pop over to the Historical Society and see if they have any information about the rug or about the family. Maybe I'll see if they have information about the family, the Richardsons, right? Um, because I'm guessing, I can't imagine she had one excellent rug and none others, right? I bet she had a collection. Because at this point people collected, right? They won't 10 years later, but at this point people collected. And when people are collecting, they're like they've got like rabies, right? Like rug rabies. Like they're driving up and down the coast like maniacs every weekend looking for rugs, driving into Canada. It's like they're like infected with the rug craze, right? And it is called a rug craze at this time. There is a major trend in collecting. I bet Mrs. Richardson was one of those. I'll see what I can find out. That'll be an interest. I gotta make a list of all. Barbara, if you're still on, if you have time to just jot that down. Barbara helps me with remembering my lists. I'm no good at my lists. Now for something really different, right? I thought this was the next slide. Um, this is another one that I think he got on this little trip. So Mrs. K.A. Heath of Dover Plains, New York, blue, salmon, and purple, 3 foot by 3 foot 6 inches, unsheared wool and cotton and this is from New Brunswick, Canada. So both of these were from New Brunswick. So this might be two different farmhouses. Can you imagine? Oh, God, can you imagine? Two different stops, two different farmhouses yield these two rugs. Now, this is an interesting one because it's so different, right? It's so different. There is some of the same stuff going on here, but where this goes to that conversation, what is the inspiration for this rug? This rug does look more like a Coptic mat, right? That makes no sense, but it does. So what's going on here? Is it just the question of colors? Are there not enough colors? Do we have someone here? The person who made this rug understood about breaking it down and populating the different feels with motifs. They put a little thin border on, right? Little inch border or whatever. It looks great, perfect proportion, right? And then they did the inner diamond, fantastic. A lot of rugs have the border and the inner diamond. So far, so good. But then what happened? Then it's like, oh, Gail, good to see you. Good morning. Then it's like, what happened then? Maybe because it doesn't have any indication of what the colors are here, maybe it was just like, well, I've only got four colors, so we're just going to have to, make this work. Maybe the person felt color wise that there weren't a lot to choose from, so they were just going to do something that was extremely simplified. Maybe it was someone who thought, I'm very comfortable with the geometry of organizing this rug and designing, they would never have said designing, but of laying out this rug. I'm very comfortable with the geometry. But as soon as we get to the swirly things like flowers and scrolls, I'm just not sure. That's in terms of how it feels to me. That's how it feels to me. It's like they did the skeleton of it with the diamond in the border, and then maybe it was like, okay, I feel safe in the geometry. Let me put in a square in the center, and then stalling for time. Okay, let me divide this center. Now we got four squares. Okay, so now we've got quite a bit going on, and then maybe sooner or later it was like, all right, I understand that rugs are supposed to have scrolls. Let's go. And then they just drew the scrolls from there. I'm just making up this story as we go along. But it is a rug that's, the person seems to have taken massive labors here to lay out the essentials, right? The proportions are right. The backbone to it is perfect. The scrolls are what's different. Now, they're not bad. I think they're absolutely fantastic. I think they're so different. They're sort of a ghostly, lighter, maybe white color, and they're done as an outline. I just can't say that I've seen a rug this age that employs that technique, like the ghostly outlining shadows. I can't say that I've seen that, like at all. That's very rare to see to this day. Do you notice inside that dark diamond in the center, the four scrolls even go to subtle lines, right, at the north, south, east, west of the dark diamond, right? So there's more lines in there. Whoever did this, the question is going to be, right, to the conversation in Kent's book here, what is the inspiration for this? What are you thinking when you see this? Are these, it's a little bit arts and crafts, right? But I don't see that strong enough to say, yeah, they were inspired by like arts and crafts flowers, or it's more filigree than that. It's very odd. What were they looking at? Could it have been a book plate? Could it have been wallpaper? Could it have been a daguerreotype? Oh, you know what? It could have been a daguerreotype case. If you picture this rug tipped the tall way, I could totally see this being tooled in leather, right? That actually makes more, when I said it out loud, I thought, yeah, that makes more sense than anything. I don't know. If in your travels and on your adventures you ever find a daguerreotype case, whether it's the gutta percha or the leather that has this design, then we will know. We will know. As time goes on, we'll figure this stuff out bit by bit, right? We're never going to get all the mysteries solved. But one of these days, someone's going to see this and go, oh my God, where did I see that? They completely copied this design from, they're pulling it from somewhere because it doesn't look like it's coming naturally. They're not trying to look at the scrolls inside the dark diamond, right? um, they're not doing anything, right? They're not like making these like big leafy lavish swirls, right? They're not super decorative. They're very contained. They have been made to fit inside that diamond. That's not really the point of a scroll, is it? The scrolls are supposed to go berserk and get all leafy and flowery and add all this lushness, heaviness, right? to the composition. These are very contained, like architectural, like the top of a Doric, um, Ionic, right? It would be an Ionic column, very contained. But they're not performing the job of a scroll. They're not doing that lavish work, the heavy lifting that a scroll does. The part that's doing the heavy lifting, the more florid part, is the corner motif that looks a little bit like a flower, a bit of a cornstalk feel to it too, right? Like what is that? It looks almost like a lotus or something. It makes me wonder whether this person was looking at a book to try to get some ideas. But what they ended up with does not at all resemble a hooked rug from this period. But it is really, really curious. This is the most unusual in terms of motifs I think that he has in this book. And I'm surprised that he was attracted to it and interested in it, because based on the comments that he makes and the way that he talks, I would think that he would think that this isn't a great example. In my mind, this is an extraordinary example because it is so different than everything else that we've seen. Bless you. This is more of what I think of as the Kent style. Let me find this one in the book. Some of these I just didn't put into our presentation because the pictures just aren't good enough. So this is from the collection of Mrs. E. O. Chernikoff, Early American Unsheared Hooked Rug, circa 1825. Okay, so that's not possible. This has got to be a sewn rug, caterpillar rug, something like that. Small mauve vase. Ooh, the vase is mauve. Okay, now here's another research rabbit hole. Mauve. Remember that book Mauve that came out a while back? It was about the history of the color mauve. It was so super interesting. Wasn't that the 1860s? I don't think it was. I don't even think it was the 1820s. Let me know though if anybody has time to go down that rabbit hole. The color mauve. I know that uh, the discovery, I mean, it sounds crazy, but the discovery of the color that led to, like, open the floodgates to synthetic dyes, right? Chemical dyes. Mauve is what led the way to that, right? Creating color in a laboratory that would be reliable and the same from instance to instance. Mauve did all that. So it's funny that he says mauve because I'm not sure that mauve was around in 1825. But in any case, the vase is of a color that resembles mauve. Um, Holds a bouquet of flowers in delicate pastel tones of lavender, rose, and gray. Ooh, how pretty and understated is that? Branches of similar flowers on either side. Black wool ground. This is 44 inches by 27 inches. This is an extraordinary rug. This is an extraordinary rug. It sounds color-wise like it's really very unusual. Black background, right? So at the time, we don't see a lot of rugs with this solid of a black background. Unless I'm wrong, it looks like there is some shift in color, but it doesn't look like it's a big hot mess like a lot of the rugs we see with dark backgrounds. This seems to be a rug where somebody said to themselves, let's do a flower vase. And once they got the flower vase in there, for whatever reason, they did not want to do the business with the medallion or the diamond or create a frame within the frame. They did not want to do that. This is a very feminine rug in nature. They wanted the flowers. So they got the flowers in there. Oh, thanks, Mom. 1856 for the discovery of mauve. Okay. So we know it's not an 1825 rug. So indeed, it could be mauve, right? Because the earliest this rug could be is the late 1860s. But okay, that makes sense, Mom. Trying to keep everything in the timeline of my brain fresh, because we know that his information was not from the internet, right? So we're just double checking him as we go along a little bit. So it seems to me that the person was very, very happy with this really successful vase of flowers in the center. And then it was almost like, what was the thought process after that? I'm gonna ask you this question now, and then my mouth is gonna run some more. But I'm gonna pause here to say, if you remember back to our conversation about what could be possible inspirations for hooked rug design, which of the inspirations that we named would be the most likely to be the inspiration for this particular rug? So while you think that one through, I just want to say, and this is maybe going to give you some hints, the person dropped in the vase, and then they wanted some other motifs, but they still wanted the flowers. So they were thinking of other motifs that they could use, and they scaled those motifs to size so that they would work in this rug. You can't tell me that those poinsettias or whatever those are over on the left are that big, right? Jack and the Beanstalk big. No, but they fit beautifully, right? And they are framing that center flower pot really well. I'm thinking that the center flower pot was the original inspiration was something like a needlework, or because you see the birds in there too, right? I'm thinking it was, this isn't a completely original design. I think someone was looking at wallpaper or at an image of a flower pot. It looks like a stone pot with birds in the whole 9 yards, right? No sound or video. No sound or video. Did I go mute? No sound or video. That's making me nervous. Am I on for you all? I don't see any changes on my dashboard. I can hear you and see you. Maybe Melanie, you might have gotten. Oh no, Melanie, you've been on. That's weird. I was gonna say you might have gotten an update. Okay, good. Um, okay. Oh, that's weird, huh? I'm sorry, Melanie. So my idea for this, do you remember when we talked about as an inspiration Berlin work? Do you remember that conversation? Berlin work is like the German version of a sampler, but it doesn't have an alphabet and letters and numbers. It's just a bunch of pictures next to each other. Like whatever the pictures were that that person liked, I don't know, a terrier, a flower bouquet, a little laurel wreath, a dove with an olive branch, whatever they liked, it would hit the Berlin work. So Berlin work was just a collection of motifs jigsawed in, right? So in things being the wrong sizes too, so that they could recreate as many motifs as possible. This rug, more than any other rug that we've seen, reminds me of a Berlin work. Just because there are more motifs, they're all floral motifs, including the little wreath, but they don't have any relationship to each other. So it feels like a sampler. And I say Berlin work because we typically associate samplers with having alphabets and things like American style samplers. This reminds me more of a Berlin style sampler where it's just a few motifs sandwiched together. I think whoever made this rug, it makes me feel happy that instead of creating a composition that had geometry and a blueprint that everybody else's rugs that was understood were supposed to have, this person knew themselves, knew that they wanted the flowers, finished the flowers, knew they wanted more flowers, finished more flowers, knew they wanted more flowers, and they just did it that way, right? That is an artist, right? That is an early artist at work. That's not someone who's trying to emulate other rugs. That's not someone who's saying, oh, most of the rugs I've seen, I've noticed that they have a diamond or an oval in the center, so I better do that. No, this is a person who had the confidence to say, this is very well executed. Certainly this person has done other needle crafts, right? This isn't a one time out of the gate, look what I did. This person has done other stuff, and they've seen other stuff. But whoever made this rug was confident enough to say to themselves, this is how I want it, right? And this is what I'm doing. So this is curious for that reason, right? It does not attempt to be symmetrical, and it does not attempt to follow the rules of the other rugs at this time. It is an out on the limb rug. This one does. This is the last one we'll do tonight because I know it's getting late. This one does to some extent try to follow the rules, but it is into that hot mess category in the best way, right? So Kent, this is from Antiques magazine. Kent wrote, early American raised medallion hooked rug. When he says raised medallion, we are not talking about Waldoboro. We're talking about a higher pile and a clipped rug where it's raised. So they're hooking it higher. And when I say hooking it, I mean sewing it, right? Because the most common examples that we see of high pile rugs are rugs that were actually sewn, and somebody took the chopstick tools, I can never remember the name of the stupid tool, and put the tool under and then did a bunch of stitches at once, right? And then pulled it out, and they were an even pile. So you can get a higher pile or a lower pile, just depending on what you stick under there. Those are sewn rugs. Those are not hooked rugs. And when we see that kind of a high pile on a rug or clipped pile on a rug that's very lush and plush, and it is not a dense Waldoboro treatment, it's typically a sewn rug and not a hooked rug, right? It's just the tools that they had. It's the way that people were working. It's people looking at other people's work. It's what makes sense, right? I'm making a guess, but it's what makes sense. So I think this is a sewn rug, and that the two white or light feels are raised, um, and cut, and the rest of it, not necessarily cut, is probably looped. So this person understood about, fills, like what you would put into a rug. Okay, here's probably an open sack. Like truly, this is probably an open sack. It's 3 foot by 10 inches. Um, three 10 by 3. So 3 foot 10 inches by 3 feet. So this is probably an open feed sack doubled, right? Which you could get. You could get it that with one seam, or if it had two seams, you would just sew it together and then stitch it as one. So I think this is an opened feed sack. And it looks like what might be going on here, and I can only guess, and you can chime in too, but I'm thinking what might have happened here was that they had a feed sack that had a circular motif on it, right? That maybe said the name of the place that it came from, or had a chicken on it or something like that. But I think it probably had a circle on it. And I think the person probably hooked the circle, hooked a little bit outside the circle to make the two circles really, really pronounced. That makes sense to me. It could also be that they had something round like a pot, and a really big lid or something, and that they put two side by side, and it was like, okay, this is all we have room for. Let's stop at two. Two isn't the most pleasing type of composition, but this falls into that category of super curious composition. What's going on here? It really is odd, isn't it? I think the genesis of the design is probably one of those two things. Could this be a dinner plate design? It could. I don't see this kind of floral on a dinner plate as being, um, right for that period. I do see this as being a possible 1930s design. But would a person who has brand new 1930s plates, in the night, this actually 1920s, right? Because he writes the book in 1930. Would a person who has the newest dishware also be inspired by the dishware to make a matching rug? It's not impossible. I think the reason he's saying, this is an earlier rug to begin with, right? So this would have to be a contemporary rug if this was inspired by a dish design. It probably is just hand drawn, or copied off of something else. This person understood about putting a leafy scroll in, so they did. Now, I mean, it has some cuteness happening here, doesn't it? Because it's like, there's my leafy scroll, check, tick the box, there it is. I got one on the top and one on the bottom, done. It's not, it's an unexpected leafy scroll, right? It's a very there but for the grace of God leafy scroll. It's not lush and lavish. This does not belong in the Garden of Eden, right? This piece of greenery, but it does exist, and it is on the rug where it should be. And huge effort was made to make this rug correct, I think. And for that reason, infinite cute points, infinite quaint points, for me, infinite value, because there's so much going on here. The border is super disproportionate to the two medallion shapes, right? Um, it's a very, very odd rug. And then the amount of different fills in the background, aren't you dying to see this rug in person? There's obviously a lot of patterned wool in the background. And then look at the different attacks of the hit or miss, like top left, right, northwest corner, not echo at all, back and forth, and then kind of boxing it out. On the top right, similar but longer stretches, right? Different fills. Whoever was making this rug was doing different stuff from top to side to bottom. They cared a lot about the way that those medallions looked. They cared a lot about trying to get that symmetry right, but they weren't as bothered by the not by the lack of uniformity in that dark background, right? The field in the background behind the medallions. They either weren't super bothered by the way that isn't a solid, or, and maybe you're thinking maybe it faded over time. Maybe it did, but there's certainly a lot of patterned wool in here, right? And that patterned wool is not about fade. It's speckled, right? It's more than one color for sure. So yeah, maybe some of it faded over time, but I'm sure that the day that this rug was made, that was not one dark background, right? That was cohesive. It was, I'm sure, all spotty and patchy way back then, also. So it is like, yeah, maybe the person just they had what they had and they worked with it as best they could. You see the darkest value going right down the middle under that top scroll, right down and exiting out the bottom left. Incredibly, that does a lot for the eye with this composition. And then there's a little bit of that dark, dark, inky dark in the top right hand corner. So weirdly enough, and it's got to be a coincidence, this rug, in terms of composition, is very artistic and modern because it does drag your eye right around the rug. You are aware that there are these darker patches, and it carries you through. It's a very unusual rug, really pretty, really different. I'm going to stop there with looking at our slides, but looking at these rugs, it just reminds me, we talk about composition a lot. And I do a lot of composition classes, and they're for people who want to do original designs. Not everybody wants to do original designs. Not everybody should do original designs. Like I always say, I love eating, but I don't love cooking. If someone else will cook for me and I can still eat it, that's good for me. You know, a lot of life works that way. Not everybody has to design. And what we're seeing with a lot of these early rugs, can imagine it's not just that not everybody's creative, right? It's not just that. That's a given, but it's not just that. It's also lack of time, right? Lack of time. People did not have the time to agonize and think about what their pattern would be, right? That was not a thing. Time was not a thing. And that's pretty universal for like the middle and lower classes. Time is not a thing. Um, what was I going to say? Um, oh, materials are going to be another major curveball. People know they don't have a lot of one color. Maybe they don't have the time to fool around with dyeing. They're going to try to make it work with mosaic, hit or miss style. Um, so that's going to be another consideration. Creating a pattern where that isn't going to be really glaring, that you don't have enough color. You don't have 12 to 1 ratio of something if you're using Kent's book. There's so many other things that go into it. Lack of resources, right? Lack of being able to say, ooh, today I want to do something that has an Asian feel to it. Let me take out that book, or let me hop on the internet and look at some Asian design or Persian design, or specifically Indian design, or whatever. Let me look at a mola. Let me look at a teveve, right? We can do that now, but they couldn't do that at all. It would be like, let me look around the living room, and that would be it. Taking a survey of what you had, what your patterns were that were available to you, would be pretty much that. So limited in so many ways. When we see rugs that are really extraordinary and different, that's really inspired. But most people were just trying to make a rug that was at least pretty, with all of those things working against them. And they did remarkably well. We don't have any of those things working. Maybe you have time working against you. But as far as variety in creating patterns and coming up with inspiration, as far as being able to get other colors, we don't have that nowadays, right? So when we try to create antique rugs, or emulate the look of rugs, the earliest rugs from the 19th century, we really have, you can do it with your nice milled wool and all of that stuff. You definitely can, but we don't you'd have to almost be in like some kind of deprivation mode, right? Put like a blindfold on and just go through your closet and just pull. I mean, you would have to really go out of your way to put yourself in a similar state where none of those things were working in your favor, and you still had to make a rug, and you hoped that it would be beautiful and something that you would be proud of. But it would almost be like doing a challenge with very little of the right color choices, right? Very little to help you with drawing the thing in the first place. Everything would have been that much more difficult. So when we look at these patterns, yeah, they look folky and naive, for not just because people weren't trained in art, but because they were busy. I bet if you were a rug maker, you wanted, just like this part's the same as today, you wanted to finish your rug and then you wanted to start another rug, right? Your side of the bed might be warm, but the other side of the bed might be cold when someone's feet touch the ground in the morning. You probably want to make rugs for all of the bed sides, for all of the you will put rugs in the Victorian period on top of other rugs, a jack, trip, or sandwich of rugs, rug upon rug upon rug. They did it, and we know they did it from all the pictures that we see. So you would want to make as many as you could if you could, right? You probably wouldn't spend a lot of time agonizing about the pattern. When people do, that really is curious. Like that one that I said reminded me of Berlin work, with the very intricate flowers, with the birds, and then a few more motifs squeezed in, right? That person was not a minimalist. They wanted lots of flowers in there, and they didn't seem to be in a rush to move to the next rug. Some of these other ones, it is kind of like next, on to the next. So it's just interesting to look at them, I think, and to talk about them. This isn't for everybody, obviously. This is for us, but it's not for everybody, these kinds of conversations. I think they are useful to put things into historical context. And I think at this point in the game, right, we're missing so much information about rug hooking and the history of rug hooking. We can look at Kent's book, and we'll look at it some more for sure. Um, and it's a grain of salt book, right? Like all of these early texts are grain of salt books. But we can look at them now with more information, not from a superior point of view, but just with more information. We can look at them now, sort of process it according to what we know, and say, this makes sense, this doesn't make sense. This is an opinion, this is a fact. It's easier to weed through in a black and white way and say, that was very Kent, right? But that doesn't really make sense. And that's useful to be able to do that. We've gotten quite far in our conversations about rugs when we can sit on a Friday night and do this. But it does help, I think, with inspiration and dreams and thinking about patterns and thinking about going out over the weekend and maybe bumping into one of these beautiful early rugs, right? So the more we talk about it, the more we, what's the word? What's the word when you, The Secret, remember that book, The Secret? The whole thing, like when you imagine or picture something, you make it happen. What's the word for that? You tape a dollar bill. I read The Secret when it came out. You tape a dollar bill over your bed and it begets. That's not the word. Begets money. Do you know what I mean? I know somebody has the word. Well, anyway, it was great being with you today. Took my mind. Manifest. Thank you. Manifest. That is absolutely the word. It was great being with you today. It took while I was having my surgery, I was actually thinking, I can't wait to get on tonight because spending some time with friends. It was a tough day. It was an exhausting day. It was scary. It was scary. So it's nice to come back at the end of the night and come back to the center and talk about old rugs. It was great spending some time with you. I hope you all have a great weekend. I will get as much done as I can. Make sure you look for the new classes. I'll be putting out the Design Like the Group of Seven and the Hit or Miss class, Jack Draper sandwich. You love it when I say that. April says, thank you so much. You had a fun episode. Oh, have a great weekend too. I'm going to be working on my projects. I'll put out some new stuff for you. I haven't put out that stupid video yet. We're still trying to edit it. It's a lot of trouble, but you are going to be seeing a really in-depth punch video from me this weekend. Oh, you too, Mom. I'm glad you're still there. Sending lots of love. Kaz, happy weekend to you too. Everybody, I will see you. I will be back with you on Monday. The kids are not on vacation anymore. I will be back with you. Thank you, Diane. Thank you, Deborah, on Monday. And be looking for those new products in the meantime. Thank you all so much. Manifesting good feelings. And